influential figures during the reign of King Henry VIII was Thomas Cromwell, who rose from humble origins to become a man who ruined the livelihoods of so many. Cromwell's raids on the English monasteries, abbeys and religious houses can still be seen today in the ruins around England. He was a man whose brutal streak attracted the king's eye, and he was also a man with utmost loyalty and would carry out the wishes of the king, but he too would fall from grace.
I'm going to go into the history of the Dark Ages following the fall of Rome. And then I'm going to go backwards into Rome, to the fall of Rome and who made it fall. And the people who made Rome fall were the very faces that you're looking at on the screen here. All right? And this is a history that has been covered up. I'm going to read a quote by a journalist, Hubert Marlin, all right, a journalist and writer. It says, "The whitening of British culture began 100 years before with the great-great-uncle of Oliver Cromwell, Thomas Cromwell, from 1485 to 1540. The Prime Minister of King Henry VIII will destroy 97% of all the artifacts of the country, which in general represents centuries of British history, but were no longer in conformity with the racist tone which now advocated a policy of whitewashing the history of the kingdom. Statues will be pirated, frescoes will be broken, mosaics pounded." All right, and this was a quote by Hubert Marlin, a journalist writer, okay? And you're looking at the evidence of what I just read on the screen.
And nationalised half of the wealth of the country. That was in private hands.
Cromwell spotted an opportunity to enhance his standing with Henry by making his king rich.
With papal jurisdiction out of the way, it's as if the constraints are gone. Cromwell has a mandate to do whatever he wishes.
And so, across the kingdom, Cromwell began pulling down religious buildings and stripping them of anything of value.
They're taking ornaments, they're taking linen, they're taking beds, vast amounts of books. Libraries of books are burned, and then they're just thrown onto a bonfire. It's an amazingly disruptive social moment, and sort of like an orgy of stripping and, gutting a great institution. There's no precedent for it.
The devastation that this wreaked can still be seen to this day. These magnificent buildings had dominated the landscape for centuries, inspiring reverence and pride among the people who lived by them. But the money the dissolution made went straight into Henry's pocket. The treasury swelled, and Cromwell's favour with the king increased.
Shalom, shalom. It's your brother PJ again, come back. It's a continuation off of the lesson earlier from about a week and a half ago. And this, we're going to talk about Thomas Cromwell and iconoclasms and the whitewashing of the black European nobility. The indigenous population of Europe, and also the Moors that came in, also those artifacts, those relics. And this is the main reason why today when you go in Europe, you don't see a lot of the art that I was talking about earlier. You don't see a lot of those pictures, or you don't see those depictions of these dark-skinned kings and queens of that time. It's because of this thing that happened. And when I say iconoclasm, what that means is what they did is and this was through Thomas Cromwell by the work of Henry VIII. Henry VIII. And I'll put up a picture of him. And basically Henry VIII was of mixed descent, because just like I said earlier, you had these Slavic and Germanic and these other tribes coming in, the lighter skinned tribes coming in, and they were working their way up in status. And so a lot of them were monks, bishops, noblemen, and they worked up under the kings and queens, and a lot of them finally worked themselves into where they got to marry some of them. So King Henry the Eighth was of mixed descent, and when you look at the picture, you can tell he is the original picture that he looks a little mixed, what we call mixed today. And so that's where this is going to. And King Henry the Eighth, he had 6 wives in his whole rulership. And out of those 6 wives, if going back and looking at history, these were daughters of black nobility, black rulership. So every time he was marrying into these families, what was really going on is, what happens when one kingdom marries into another kingdom, they join together. So what they had became King Henry the Eighth. And so with that, they had a lot of control of Europe, Britain, Scotland, and Wales, and Ireland, because he had control of all these different lands, because he had married into all these different families. And that was the thing he was doing. And I just want to read a little excerpt. And based on historical writings, there is little doubt that Thomas Cromwell and his cronies were responsible for most of the destruction of the black British and Scottish and Irish nobility, as well as the common folks. The greatest example of this occurred in the late 1500s and early 1600s. Thomas Cromwell I, Earl of Essex, 1485 to 1540, was an English lawyer and a statesman who served as a chief master minister to King Henry VIII of England from 1532 to 1540. Cromwell was a roughman. In his own words, he turned to a sectarian extremism, often painted as a king's enforcer. He was recorded for murder, looting, destruction, and it was undisputed. No one could be sure of the exact figure, but it was estimated of the destruction and it was legalized by Cromwell, amounted to about 97% of the English art then in existence. Statues were hacked down, frescoes were smashed to bits, precious metal works were melted down, shrines were reduced to rubble. This was vandalism when craftsmanship was way intensely hated for imaginary depicting of the divine, and that the strong and resonant parallels today. So that's just a little excerpt from an article. And so basically what had happened was, this was the time of the dissolution of monarchs, or destruction of monarchs. Just like I said, so Thomas Cromwell had an idea to get King Henry VIII more money, said, I'm going to go around and melt down all this gold. I'm going to go hack down all these statues. And he was going to try to get as much money as he could off the common folks, out of the churches, out of the banks and everything. They started looting, and it was legal because it was under King Henry VIII. And another thing about King Henry VIII is he wanted a son. So this is the reason why he got so many wives, and it wasn't commonplace to have these many wives, because he was under the Catholic Church. But what he did is he became the head of his own church and separated from the Catholic Church. So he was really doing his own thing. So he got to, marry, remarry under his rule, and a lot of his wives died. So he was just on a pathway of destruction. So this is why in history, when people try to tell you about, there's the black nobility, that black people ruled, or dark skinned or Negro people ruled Europe, Scotland, Wales, Ireland up until the 1800s. That it's hard to imagine, because when you see history, or when it's told or depicted, you only see white. And this is the biggest reason why, because of these two people depicted. And it wasn't just Thomas Cromwell, it was also his sons and a gang of people, because he had went around recruiting different people that wanted to go around destroying and looting, because it was money for him, it was money for the king, it was money for everybody. It was very, very profitable to loot and to do these things. And his son's name was Oliver Cromwell. And like I said before, when you talk about the crucibles and they tell you about all these religious wars, you gotta understand when they say Islamic State. Islamic State was, when they say that word, is basically when they're describing like how when people they're basically doing their own thing. They might not be, into Islam per se, what we think of Islam today, but they say Islamic State because they are basically like a dictatorship, or they don't went rogue. So that's their way of saying that these people have went rogue and against what the establishment wanted them to do. And it was basically an establishment at that day and time was the black nobility. So that's why they depict this person as doing something as Islamic. That's why they use these type of words, this type of framing. So just like I said, he was an advisor to King Henry. And one thing that a lot of people don't know is he was poor. He started out poor, dirt poor, broke. Just like I said, a lot of the Slavic people, they came up dirt poor and broke, but he worked his way up. So he always had this enviness. He was always bitter. And just to point out another thing, this also didn't happen just in Europe. This was something that happened all over the globe and all over the world. That's why they call, and you hear something called like the Renaissance, or you hear about something called the Dark Ages. And when they refer to Dark Ages, when they refer to when the dark-skinned people ruled. But they don't like to point that out. But that's what that means. And just like they talk about the knights, when they call them knights because these are dark-skinned people. That's where they get all this stuff from, but they don't point this stuff out. And there's pictures of knights, and the faces are black or brown. See what I'm saying? So they use words in a certain way to trick people. So if you're not looking at what these words meant in that day and time, or looking up what these people look like, or because they have a description of what these tribes or these clans of people look like, or what they should be described as in that day and time, you're not going to know anything, because people today, they just depict everybody in that area as white, when that was never the case. That's something that's been whitewashed history of today, just like they do with the Native Americans, they do with the Egyptians, they do with a lot of different, they do with the original Asian man. They do that with a lot of different things. That's something they did globally, but it started, the idea of it started in Europe, because Abraham Lincoln was white, George Washington was white. A lot of these people, Salakia, they were dark-skinned people. And a lot of these people do not understand this, because they don't have current pictures of these people. They just give you paintings and just recent descriptions of these people. So it's a totally different game from now. So it's been a whole process of using the educational system, and it's been different stages. Just like in the 1900s, you had people like Jimmy Carter, you had Roosevelt. They had put certain laws into place, and you had the Rockefeller Foundation come in and fund a lot of the educational system to make it where you had to go to school and you had a curriculum and all this. This is where this come from. This is why certain books is not allowed in school, and only certain topics they talk about in school, because they know they only, with certain things, they're only gonna go so far and go so deep, and they don't want to explain things the right way, because it would cause controversy based off of how we live today. That's why this history doesn't get told. It's controversial, very, very controversial history. So just to give you another little quick description of Thomas Cromwell, and just a little bit about him. When King Henry's chief advisor, Cardinal Wolsey, fell from grace in October 1529 from failing to secure the king of annulment from his first wife, Catherine Aragon. Just like I said, he was trying to divorce a lot of his wives because they wouldn't give him that son. He wanted that son for the next heir. It was expected that his favorite servant, Thomas Cromwell, would fall with him. Cromwell feared this himself and wept bitter tears of regret. But as soon as he railed or pronounced that he would go on the court and to make more, June 1540, when it comes to the end of the spectacular, Cromwell arrived late for a meeting at the Privy Council on 10th of June. As he entered the chamber, and the captain of the guard came forward and arrested him on charges of treason and heresy. Barely had he had time to draw breath before he was conveyed into the Tower. Cromwell's arrest was sent into shock and waves across the country, and was soon reported in the courts of Europe. and he fell from grace, and he had been spectacular. Even in the court of renown, it is the shift of turns of fortune. That it has happened as soon as after it has received a very public renaissance of the king's favor suggests that it was a mastermind, but not Henry, by Cromwell's arch rival, the Duke of Norfolk, and the Stephen Gardiner of Bishop. This happened as soon as after he received a very public reassurance of the king's favor, suggests that he was a mastermind by not Henry, but by Cromwell's arch rivals, the Duke Norfolk and Stephen Gardiner, the Bishop of Winchester, who had long sought his destruction. And as you get this, these are dark-skinned people because they were after him. He went around making a lot of enemies. So that's what happens when that's how the Most High works. Just like people say karma, the same thing. That's how the Most High works. That's how the Spirit works. You go around doing these things, destroying people's history, their homeland, their heritage, their culture. That stuff gonna come back on you. People gonna sought after you, and that's what happened to him. So playing upon Henry's increasing paranoia and volatility, because he was paranoid. Yeah, King Henry was out there wilding out. He's wilding out, straight up wilding out. They whispered that Cromwell had usurped his authority and confidently predicted that the king's imminent death and planned to marry himself to his master, his eldest daughter, Lady Mary. Most stinging of all, they claimed that Cromwell had called the king's virility, which means his could he have kids? Could his Johnson work? Into question over his failure to consummate the marriage to Anne of Cleves. This was enough to persuade King Henry to accede to his chief minister arrest. So he went ahead and arrested him. Because they went ahead and fed him this story, which was true or not. And he was so paranoid, he wasn't going to do the due diligence to go see if this was true or not for himself. So he was just out there doing whatever. Cromwell lashed out at his opponents in a new parliament, which was opened on the 12th of April, passing a series of measures to consolidate his position and included a new taxation bill. Cromwell knew that the bill would smell the royal coffers considerably, that it was forcing through the parliament, that he was effectively buying back Henry's goodwill. It worked. 6 days later, the king granted his minister the earldom of the Essex, one of the most ancient and distinguished titles in the land. At the same time, he appointed him to the senior court of office in the Lord Great Chamberlain and gave him extensive majesty lands. This apparent vaulted face on Henry's part and prompted an astonished Morley to remark the new Earl of Essex, and was as much accredited with the king as ever he was. But when Henry met Anne, as soon as after all their arrival in England in December 1539, he was bitterly disappointed. I like her not. He shouted dismayed Cromwell when the meeting was over, and ordered his chief master to get him out of the marriage. Cromwell knew, though, that the treaty was binding, and that it was with extreme reluctancy that Henry was obligated to put his neck in the yoke and marry her on the 6th of January 1540. So he basically had set up the deal where he had to marry her. It wasn't no way he could get out of it. And he basically set it up. It was cold, dirty. Set both of them up. That's how Thomas Cromwell was working. He was just trying to work, trying to just make a deal, swindle a deal, do whatever. He never forgave the man who had got him into the mess. April 1540, briefly back in the king's good books, the year 1539 had been an annus horribilis. From Cromwell, by the dawn of 1540, his standing with the king and was at all-time low. Thanks to his chief minister, Henry was married to a woman who he found abhorrent, and he was the enemy of the Catholic Europe, and not to mention many of his own subjects, and was flailing, and the world knew it. On the 10th of April 10th, the French ambassador Charles Marollet reported that the minister was taunting and chiefly predicted that his imminent downfall. But just when it seemed that Cromwell's relationship with the king was doomed and that he would have swung back his favor, all of this was spent in danger for Cromwell, and he knew it. And he went on the offensive by securing Parliament's assent for the continuous statute of proclamations, which gave him decrees to issue by the king or the council the same legal status as the Act of Parliament. Cromwell no doubt had the mind of further religious reforms, which suggests that he was confident in wrestling back in his favor with the king. His confidence was to prove he misplaced. Reprove misplaced. Winter of 1539-1540, the relationship turns ugly when Henry's beloved third wife, Jane Seymour, died in October 1537, shortly after giving birth to his long son and heir, the future Edward V. Cromwell. Immediately started searching for his successor. When Henry's beloved third wife, Jane Seymour, died in October 1537, shortly after giving birth to his long son heir, future Edward V, Cromwell immediately started searching for a successor. Within weeks, he found that the lady whom had believed in the perfect candidate. He had believed he had a perfect candidate. The 22-year-old and daughter of the Duke of Cleves, who he had met much recommended her. Her father had expelled papal authority for his realm and was therefore a natural ally for the English king. But Henry's ambassador admitted that he had no great praise of her beauty. So it was not until years later, when the treaty between France and Spain left the king desolate for allies, that he instructed Cromwell to begin negotiations. Before he could agree to the betrothal, though he demanded that the leading German artist Hans, the younger, should be dispatched to Cleves and to paint Anne's likeness, the result was flattered enough to convince him. Was flattered enough to convince him. So the painting was good enough to convince him that I marry her, that she would make a pleasant wife. The marriage treaty was duly signed, and it's easy to imagine increasingly irascible and paranoid Henry, now in his late 40s, lashing out in his low-born minister on his way to determine perhaps the highlight of his gulf in their social status as he means to reinforce authority. Spring 1539, powerful enemies pulled and plugged Cromwell's reform. Just like I said earlier, he was doing all this sideways stuff, and people that he did dirty in his early life came and got him. And that was his demise. And I'll put a video at the end basically telling what happened to him. And I just want to touch on, before I close out, because I just want to touch on the scripture, and I'll put it up there on the screen, but I just want to read this for the people, because this reigned true today, because this is what's happening today. And this is Psalms 85:11-13. And the truth shall spring out of the earth, and the righteousness shall look down from heaven. So just like they said, the truth will spring out of the earth. Just like now, you see, they're finding all these artifacts. They found all these relics, and it's getting to the point they can't even deny that these people they finding that, hey, they look black, they look like Negroes. Hey man, we didn't. Our perception of history is wrong. They have to go back and redo history because they have lied on so many different things. They lied about who the original man of America was, who the original man of Europe was, who the original man of Asia was, who the original man of Africa was. And I'll put a picture up of all this. And these are all dark-skinned people. And they know this. This is a fact. This is a fact all day. And this is something that people like us, our people, need to push and preach, because they are erasing our heritage, our culture worldwide. It don't matter what you believe in. They're erasing it worldwide, like you never existed. And that's why it's not good. And I will touch on this later, just like I say, Charles Darwin out of Africa theory, because the reason why they wanted to make that theory is because they wanted to make it seem like you were only from Africa, and anything that was great and that was of any importance that was not in Africa, you could not have any type of attachment to it, no heritage to it. Your people didn't do it. That was only my people. When in reality, that was all our people doing everything worldwide, because we have been here first. We've been here a very long time. And again, like I said, like I was talking about, and the righteousness shall look down from heaven. And that's just like now. The righteous meaning the holy ones, the ones that watch over us, the angels, the Most High, the Spirit. That's what they look down on us. Yahweh, Hawa. They look down on us. And they see the truth for what it is. They see that people are waking up. They're seeing the truth. They're seeing these pictures. They're seeing these artifacts. And they're waking up and they're being like, wow. Even white people, black, it don't matter who it is. And I'm just saying colors. This is just to give a basis. That's not what they really call. But people of all races, all colors and creeds, they are coming out and admitting that, hey, man, the original Asian man, dark skin, Negroid. And Asian people are admitting this. The original European was Negroid. White people are admitting this. European people are admitting this. You see what I'm saying? So it's getting to the point that it's getting undeniable. And so the righteous, they look down on it. They look down on it and they smile. And so I'm going to go to verse 12. And ye, the Lord, shall give that which is good, and the land shall yield her increase. So as time turns and history corrects itself, the Lord will look down with pleasure. He will look down with a smile, because he will see everything that was the way it was is going back. The way that it used to be is going back. So everything's reverting itself, and that's what you see today in today's society. That's why you see such a fight between just people inside, young people, old people. That's why you see a fight between the so-called black Americans of today. They just not, a lot of young people, they just not accepting what's the status quo. They want to ask more questions. There's more history out there, and it just ain't Africa. And then they don't want to tell you that Egypt, Africa, they just want to tell you that, oh, no, you just was in the dirt. You just a savage. They just want to put all the negative connotations on you like you didn't do nothing. When we built everything, we got mounds over here in America. We got pyramids over here in America. We built buildings. A lot of people understand that they just want to depict Native Americans over here as they just lived in huts. No, they built buildings just like they built buildings over there in Europe. They built nice stone buildings out of clay and all this different type of stuff. They came over here and destroyed it. Just like I'm telling you, Thomas Cromwell destroyed that, and that was the whitewashing of history. They still do it today. They like to cover up history and destroy it. And this is the purpose of my channel and everything, is just to bring highlight to that history. And this is all our history, and this is something they try to take away from us. And this is why it seems like in our life we feel missed out. We feel like we don't understand where we belong in the story, when in fact we all in the story. If it weren't for us, there would be nothing today. We build everything today. Anything you see, you touch, was created by a black man, and they know it. They can't deny it, and they won't deny it. and that's the Most High, showing his favor, and the land will turn back to us if we come back into the knowledge of who we are as a people. Come back to the knowledge of knowing that we are the chosen people. We are the chosen, that we gotta follow a certain life. We gotta follow a certain lifestyle. We gotta follow these laws. We gotta eat right. We gotta meditate. We gotta work together. We gotta stop hating on each other. It ain't all about money. It's all about coming together, because all we need is land and resources. People want to just chase money. But I ain't trying to preach. I'm just giving on a little tidbit. But verse 13, righteousness shall go before him, and it shall set us in a way that of his steps. So saying righteousness mean just like the ancient people before, they knew how to respect the earth. They knew a way to live among the earth that wasn't destroying it. Today we gotta cut trees down. We gotta dig up the land and all this stuff. They weren't doing that in this type of way back in the day, to where they were destroying the environment, where things were dying off, and we didn't know how we were gonna survive. And that's what that's talking about, because the way we're living, we done got so far away from the ancient ways. And that's what the so-called white man came to do. And I step on and I come into where that person came from, because that is not Esau. This person is a creation of the people that were already here, the Negro people that are already here. That's something separate, and those people have a whole different origin. We'll be touching that later. That's a whole nother video for a whole nother day. But I just want to say a special shout out to UB News 432 to drop, because they always dropping some good videos. And man, shout out to all the elders. Shout out to anybody pushing videos, pushing this history, this truth. And you know, it come with punches, bro, because people be hating, man. It come with punches. So I appreciate everybody coming out, supporting, watching these videos, sharing it, and the views going up, man. So hey, I appreciate everything. Y'all be blessed. Y'all stay safe out here. Y'all get this knowledge. Y'all eat right. Make sure your family straight. Shalom. Ava Kavah. Kahala. Yahweh Bahashem. Yahweh Shah. And y'all take it easy. It's your brother PJ, man.
Shockingly, on the scaffold of Tower Hill, with an executioner and his axe administering the brutal justice of the Tudor king. But on that day, with thousands of people watching, Thomas Cromwell's execution did not go smoothly. Now, Cromwell rose to prominence as a lawyer, and before he earned the trust of the king, he was a key advisor to Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, the chief advisor to the king, and the key liaison for the Pope in England. He was a well-established lawyer and merchant in London, and he then, in 1523, obtained a seat in the House of Commons as a Burgess. He was to begin with actually criticising King Henry VIII, and he was preparing at the time a speech against the king's intended invasion of France, but he then realised that this was not the best idea. He criticised Parliament and the lack of productivity, but in 1524 he became a member of Wolsey's household. He helped Wolsey in dissolving around 30 monasteries to raise funds to fund Wolsey's new schools, including the Cardinal College in Oxford. But Cromwell was then appointed a member of Wolsey's council and one of his most trusted advisers. He quickly fell from power, however, and Cromwell made a number of enemies. However, he then sought to have a career which would eclipse.
Oh, sorry, one more thing. And in the description, I'm going to link it up. And also, I'm going to put some more information on the website. I've been behind. I know it's probably been about a couple weeks since I put some more information. I'm trying to make videos about the information that's already on there, because it's a lot to read. I know. I'm trying to get, help people get caught up with things, a lot of information. But in the description, I'm going to put a Word document that I put together of this information that I'm covering. It's going to go into more depth. It's going to have pictures. It's going to give you primary resources and primary sources and where this information comes from. So you just don't think I'm making it up and I'm just telling you some stuff because I heard it from somebody. No, this is actual real history that they hide, that's in books, that most white scholars know. And any college professor knows this. They just don't like to tell black folks because they assume that you need to read. But I just want to come back and tell you that y'all be blessed. Thank you.